So distinguished CEOs, partners, friends, all of you who've been able to make time to join us this evening. And of course, braving the rains. Paul, I think every time you come, you bring the rains, which is a good thing. We consider it a blessing. So allow me to first start by appreciating you, Paul, a long-standing champion of responsible business and a true friend of the UN Global Compact. Paul, thank you for being here once again in rainy Nairobi and for continuing to remind us that the most successful companies are those that put purpose at the heart of business. And we'll get the chance to hear a bit more about this very concept. So each year, this convening offers us a rare opportunity for meaningful exchanges. It is a space where business leaders, all of you gathered here today, as peers, come together for honest reflections. We ask ourselves every time we gather, what does responsible leadership look like in today's world? And how can we shape the solutions our societies need the most? So, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to set the context on why we have gathered you here today. We meet at a defining moment for Africa and for the world. We've seen the climate disruptions, the economic headwinds, geopolitical tensions, and the widening social inequalities that are testing the resilience of businesses. Yet, amid these challenges, we are seeing markers of resilience and reinvention. Companies investing in renewables. I think for the first time, we've seen that renewable energy has generated more power than coal. We are seeing companies leading societal transformation, empowering women and youth, and really working to strengthen value chains that put purpose at the center of performance. We see the bottom line proof that doing good and doing well are not mutually exclusive. This is what we call Africans momentum. It's not an aspiration, but a reality. But even as we progress and as progress takes shape, we must recognize the urgency of this moment. The choices we make in the next few years will determine whether we achieve a just transition or if we deepen inequality, whether we build resilient economies or we continue to react to crises. The window for incremental change is closing fast, and business leadership must rise to meet this defining decade. We meet here today at a pivotal time on the global calendar. We've just come from the UN General Assembly in New York, which pretty much set the stage for global cooperation. We're heading into COP30, which is just around the corner, where the world will be looking to Africa for its climate leadership and innovation. And in December, in Qatar, we will host the Conference of State Parties, underscoring the central role of integrity and governance in driving sustainable growth. Business leaders, these milestones remind us that the work ahead is immediate, it's interconnected, and deeply consequential for Kenya, Africa, and the world as a whole. And so the question before us is, how do we turn this momentum into influence and leadership? How do we move from pockets of excellence to collective impact at scale? We at the UN Global Compact believe that business can and must be a force for good in society. Through our 10 principles, which focuses on the 10 key issue areas under the 4 categories of human rights, labor standards, environmental stewardship, and anti-corruption, as well as with our Forward Faster initiative, we have a shared blueprint with yourselves to accelerate progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals. We are working with all your companies, all the business leaders represented here today are signatories to the UN Global Compact, and as well the partners who are working collectively to advance critical agendas that will put us on a path of sustainable development. We are supporting you, CEOs, and your teams to bring these commitments to life through the different platforms that we offer, be they our accelerator programs, our peer learning groups, our collective action platforms, as well as the meaningful engagements like the one we have here today. And we see the results. We see your teams showing up, and we see you. You as leaders setting the tone at the top and steering your companies with courage through uncertain times. We see the results, but we want more. That's why you're here in the room today. We call on you as individual leaders and collectively as business leaders here in Kenya to not only transform your organizations from within, but to also work collectively to shape the systems around you for lasting change. Because the transformation the world needs will not happen within your company walls alone. It will call for CEOs to look beyond profit, to lead with purpose for their businesses, the communities, as well as the planet we live in. And so today's dialogue is part of a larger effort to connect local leadership to a global movement of change. Here in Kenya, across Africa and around the world, the UN Global Compact works to support all of you to make these connections meaningful as well as tangible. And we are offering you leadership platforms, some of you are participating, like the Africa Business Leaders Coalition, the Global Africa Business Initiative, which is our global convening that allows us to take center stage and leadership as Africa businesses to advance a common narrative around how we can develop the continent on a sustainable pathway. And we also convene you around our Forward Faster initiative, as well as our leadership dialogue series. And so these platforms are designed to empower you, our private sector leaders, to speak with a unified voice on the global stage, to define the rules, the standards, and the markets of the future. As we begin, I invite each of us to bring honesty, courage, and curiosity into this conversation. So we are not here to marvel at the very many challenges, but to shape the solutions ahead. I thank you all for your leadership commitment, your time, and your presence here today. And now, to ground our conversation in the broader multilateral context, it is my distinct honor to invite Mr. Anders Thompson, the UNFPA country representative and country acting UN resident coordinator in Kenya, to share the United Nations perspectives on how Kenya's private sector can lead this charge under the Pact of the Future. I thank you all for your attention, and I welcome you, Anders.
Ladies and gentlemen, what an honor, what a pleasure to be here with you today this afternoon. Good afternoon. I love this about Kenya. You greet people in a crowd and they respond. That is a very Kenyan thing. You don't get that in other countries. So when you have the opportunity, you must seize it. So I was asked by Dr. Stephen Jackson to come here and speak to you today. And I said, it'd be my pleasure, but what can I possibly tell these business leaders? I think they have much better ideas than we have in the United Nations sometimes. He said, no, it's very important. You must go and be there. And it sort of resonated with my own story. I joined the United Nations in 1998 here in Nairobi. It's 27 years ago. And I remember when I joined, because I have very unusual background, I actually have an MBA. And then later, I thought I need to enrich that MBA by understanding markets in developing countries. And I took another master's in development economics. And then I saw this job in Nairobi. I thought, this is very interesting. Let me just go and understand it. I'll stay there 2 years, maybe 3, and then I will join the private sector. I will join private business because that is what I was born to do, and that is what always attracted me. But I'm afraid now, I don't know if anybody is looking with someone with my skill profile. We can talk in the coffee break. But somehow I got stuck in the United Nations. And I think it is because the United Nations does offer a platform for people like me who want to change the world. And what I hear from you is that you also want to change the world, right? But you want to do it from a different vantage point, right? You want to use business technology, business approaches to make the world a better place, right? And you are signing up and you're coming together in this room because you see that the principles of the United Nations can guide the way you do business ethically, the principles, the their commitment to change, to a global good. And you see that being a practice that can also, at the same time, make your business more profitable, more successful, right? So I hear from you that you actually need us, huh? Which is good, huh? Which is good. So thank you for that. But I have to say, we need you more than maybe you need us, or maybe more than you think. I came with a lot of prepared remarks, but I'd rather speak a little bit openly and directly. I think it's more useful and it will stimulate the dialogue more. Because I think, and I'm talking from, you can call me a mole from inside speaking and getting you the secrets here, right? Because I think within the United Nations, we still look at private business with some suspicion. Huh? And we try to hide it and say, okay, but if we now at these times of change, maybe let's engage with private business. Maybe they can offer access to funding. We know that many of your successful businesses, you also have a philanthropic arm. Maybe we can access that. Maybe there's something about that, right? I'm from Denmark. We have Lego Foundation, we have Novo Nordisk Foundation, we have Grundfos Foundation, a lot of foundations who want to do good, but they also see it as a way to get into a new market and break into a new market. And we have to understand and respect those terms and conditions. But they come to us and ask for guidance. They ask for us to be convening. They ask for us to hook them up with politicians or leaders and so on. And we would like to do that so that we create win-win situations. But for me, it's not the funding, it's not the access to the funding that is most essential. I will reveal what I think is the most important for us as the UN in terms of what you can give us, right? Because we need to create a win-win situation, right? And I always tell my colleagues, we need to be attractive to the private sector. But it also goes the other way, right? I think where the UN is strong is on the principles, is on the mandates, is on the direction, the convening power. But where we are weak and where you can help us is on the technology, the ways of doing business, ways of running organizations more efficiently and effectively. And that is, if you're coming up with suggestions of how we can get together, this is where we are looking for your ideas, right? Everybody is talking about the UN is not effective enough, it's not efficient enough. Fine, we accept it. But we would like to reach out and grab your good ideas and help us with that so we can get better. I think now is a really good moment to have that dialogue. We see so much innovation in private sector globally with artificial intelligence that are transforming organization, online apps and mobile technologies. Safaricom is in the room, banks are in the room. When you're delivering bread for and nutrition, you use new technology. MP Shah leading, I go there myself for my health. So all of those ideas, how can we harvest them and inject them into the UN is for me the most pertinent question right now. You know, United Nations just celebrated its 80th birthday or anniversary. There is a lot to celebrate, a lot to look back on. And it's all good and it can be in the history books. But if we are not able to reinvent ourselves and to create a UN 2.0, and someone said, oh, we shouldn't have had this UN 80 because it looks back. We should be forward looking. We should have called it UN 2.0 instead and launched our reform agenda that way so it would be more forward-looking. And I actually tend to agree, because that's where we would look for what are the best apps that you bring to the market? What are the best networking technologies that you have? What are the best consolidation tools for ERP systems using AI that we can perhaps apply to the way the UN is run? And that is what we need from you. So for me, being with business leaders, I think it's an opportunity to come together. But as UN, we must be open to new ideas. We must put aside that mistrust that profitability is not a goal on its own. That must be combined with a global improvement of global public goods, of ethical leadership, of helping solving pertinent problems, including climate change or poverty or other things. And you want to do that because if we solve poverty, a bank can get more clients, for example. So what my main message here is today is that United Nations is open for business. We need your ideas and your inputs more than ever. I think there is an amazing opportunity for you to expand your markets by teaming up with the United Nations. You know, there are 4 headquarters in the world. One of them is in Kenya. I was reminded yesterday of how many UN staff are in Kenya, just the UN staff alone. I don't know if anybody knows here. If you take all the staff and all the consultants and their dependents, meaning their wife and their children, how many are present here? Anybody wants to guess? 4,000? 6,000? 2,000? 20,000 with their families, right? So for banking, that's a lot of business. For Safaricom, for telephone lines, for international schools that are building up, for MP Shah, and I see Hussein Baga is the best doctor there. You can say hello. He's helped with my blood pressure. And seriously, yeah. So there is this big opening, right? And also the UN has convening power, different agencies that work in different areas, right? So it's a massive opportunity for you. And as I close here, I promise you, I will listen in the dialogue. We see this as a massive opportunity for us. So please bring your ideas. Please push us to improve. And we will team up with you, and we will change the world together.
Just a quick highlight, just your quick thoughts on maybe what Anders mentioned. In no particular order, maybe we can start from you, Dr. I think there's a lot of call on collaboration and partnership, but I don't know if there are any quick thoughts, perhaps, on that conversation.
I can go first.
Sure.
I think I've got a free sales pitch here that has just been put here, so thanks a lot for that. I think the quick thoughts are there is more need now for public-private partnerships. There is more need for joint advocacy from what he says. There's more need to bring healthcare into these conversations. And I think the narrative that has been shared is that, yes, you have 20,000 staff, but what about the staff who are already there? The local population, what are we doing for them? So I think it's going to be a great conversation to have and to be able to bring healthcare more actively in the future dialogues.
Thank you. Tom?
I think for me, what I can add is there are those ideas that have worked elsewhere. There are those ideas that people have in their thought process, but there are those practical ideas that the collaboration can bring. being residents in this community equips us with a higher probability of coming up with practical solutions. So I like the idea of collaboration.
Thank you. How long do I have? Anders, I loved what you said. So I think it was end of last year, I was giving a talk in sustainability, and some members of the UN approached me, UNHCR, and invited me to partner up with them to find solutions for the challenges that the UN is having in refugee centers. So, for instance, Kakuma. And they were like, we don't have money to keep giving the refugees. We can't continue feeding them. We need them to start developing and creating sustainable livelihoods. How can you help us? So immediately, I said, I have a program where we go out. I manufacture, don't kill me, I manufacture, I pollute the environment. That is why I'm here, to find solutions. But we run programs and we manufacture hair care systems. So we run programs where we go out and we educate the youth, especially in poor communities, on how to manage hair and how to develop a business so that they can go out and start barbershops and start hairdressing salons. So I told them, I can put this program in Kakuma. And they said, please, how quickly can you do it? On Monday, 2 days ago, we launched in Kakuma. And we set up a salon business. We provided product. We came in with people who will do education on financing and how to manage your finances and how to develop your business. And it is a program that we hope to extend, put up more salons within the Kakuma Refugee Center, as well as move out into other markets. I currently export to 10 markets across Africa. So we're looking at doing this in DRC, in Uganda, in Burundi. And I understand your call and your cry. So I think it's up to us, people in private sector, to be creative on how do we find solutions for communities that are unable to do it for themselves. And I think it's an amazing opportunity. I felt so good when I was coming back home, just to seeing the number of lives that you actually can impact. Thank you.
Very well, dear panelists. I think we're ready to hit the ground running now on our conversation. I think our conversation will be sort of grouped into three. We'll be looking at key aspects. Number one is Africa's private sector momentum, just carrying that at wholesome, also shaping a unified narrative. I think that was also called upon as well, and also borrowing from the UNGA deliberations. And last but not least, building partnerships and ecosystems for the future. So let's first up, and in that same order, over the last few years, Africa's private sector has shown resilience and innovation responding to climate change, inequality, and governance gaps. Now, from your organization's perspective, what progress are you most proud of, and what lessons stand out from that journey, and especially also sharing your innovations as well? Over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Laban, for that question. And you're absolutely right. A lot of work has been done in the private sector. I think from the MP Shah point of view, what I'm super proud of is our Green 365 strategy. And this was a program that we started in 2019. And it was an idea that came to me when I was walking in the Karura forest. And it came to me and I was like, we need to go green in healthcare. We're talking about a lot of greening, but in healthcare, we are not going green. And I took that idea back to the hospital and I'm like, what can we do? And we brought in great ideas in terms of waste segregation, water efficiency, energy conservation. Today, we are almost there. It's been so many years of so much good work that has put in. And just about 1 month ago, our work has finally been recognized on global platforms. We are the first hospital in Africa to receive the Healthcare Sustainability Certification. And this was quite something, and we are the third in the world to have this certification from a healthcare point of view. So that really puts us in the global platforms to be able to share our stories and simple things. And one of the challenges that we saw when we were going up with this Green 365 is behavioral resistance. You may have fantastic funding, you may have donors, you may have great projects going on, but are you able to drive a team that is purpose-driven? And I think the benefits that have come from this is, yes, there have been operational savings, but the morale of the staff has changed. There is a purpose that is linked to the job. Our nursing school students, our first nursing school students, 21 of them are graduating on Friday. And they came up with a kitchen garden project. So they are growing their own, vegetables and herbs at the back. So all these initiatives are coming from them. The other day, somebody was saying, let's recycle. And in healthcare, when they say recycle, it means infection prevention control issues. Will the patient outcomes be the same? There's always that debate that we can't recycle in healthcare. And now that conversation is opening up, Laban. And it's really an interesting and a very thriving conversation. We've put up solar panels. We've put rainwater harvesting plants. We've got sensor taps. We've got motion lights. Our collaborations with various organizations have really led us to be able to say that healthcare can actually become green. We can go paperless, we can conserve, we can segregate waste. So all that is like really something that's been happening, and our work is really really being recognized with all the great outcomes. But I think there's still more that still needs to be done. I think if we leaders come with a unified voice and say that, especially CEOs come with a unified voice, like I'm doing this study with the Strathmore Business School, and we realized that almost none of the hospitals we have almost 17,000 facilities in the country. None of them are green certified. We've got universities, we've got teaching institutions, we've got a couple of other institutions that are green certified, but none in healthcare that are green certified. So that means a lot of work that needs to be done through us. And even when you look at, for example, the curriculum for doctors, nurses, we don't have any modules where we teach them about sustainability. In school, we used to be told about community health service, but that was the furthest we went in terms of promoting sustainability. So there's advocacy with the Nursing Council of Kenya, there's advocacy with the Kenya Medical Council to be able to now start training our doctors and our nurses. And the nursing school that is graduating on Friday actually has sustainability modules that we internally generated to teach them, hence they are going forward. So that's something that we're really proud of.
Thanks, Doc. Appreciate it. Congratulations for the milestones as well. Tom, what's it like at Britam? And please, while at it, don't forget to mention about Better Lab, which I think is a brilliant innovation hub. Over to you.
Okay. So to answer your question, what comes to mind in terms of what we are doing. So Britam is in the region, and we have a presence in Mozambique and Malawi. And the reason I've pointed those two countries out is talking of climate change. We know that in the last 2 years, there has been hurricanes in those two countries that really devastated, especially the lower, in terms of economics, citizens of those countries. And we found ourselves as Britam challenging ourselves to what contribution can we make to make sure or to try and stem the significant impact that this climatic change is having on in our community. So you will know that every few years, when it rains heavily up here, it ends up in floods in Lower Tana. So we thought, why don't we start with an innovative product here, and then look for ways to scale it and apply it in Mozambique and Malawi. So working with others, and this is partly where the collaboration struck a note when Anders was talking, with Swiss Re and Oxfam bringing its infrastructure to reach to the ground, and Swiss Re and us on an insurance perspective, we came up with a parametric insurance solution that studied the data of rainfall in Upper Kenya and water levels in Tana to try and predict floods so that we could warn the communities in lower Tana, because sometimes it's more appropriate to avoid the destruction before the destruction. But as we were doing it, it actually continued to rain, and there were floods in lower Tana. But because of this initiative that we had done, we were able to pay, without visiting lower Tana, the 300 families that were affected without them having to complete any form. And you know, with most of the people in this room, you can recover a lot quicker if you had a dent in your, or if something happened to you, your farm, and so on. But it is harder for these communities. So the speedy response that we were able to give was instrumental in they recovering and getting back to their normal form. But we are continuing to see how we can warn communities ahead of disasters, be they drought, or be they, and therefore what you need to do. We have a lot of pastoralists here who can do something about their livestock before their livestock dies and have to claim, because it's not enough to pay after an activity has happened or a disaster has happened, if you can do an element of planning. So talking about Beta Lab, what Beta Lab is we have devoted X% of our profits to startups. We have started off with limiting that to financial services, because we don't have enough money to bring, and support all the ideas that the young people here have. And why did we do that? We were looking at the question of sustainability. We know there isn't enough jobs in Kenya, and the informal sector, therefore, needs to be supported whenever you can to be the alternative to formal employment. So we have identified over the last 2 years young people with ideas, but not necessarily the financial or environment to do it, because it's simple things like taxation, registering your ideas with PI or whatever it is. What are they? I've forgotten. When you have an idea and you want to preserve it so that if anyone uses it, that's the one. Yeah. And the impact that has had on these startups, all of the startup environment for that matter, because I think in Africa we need to support that sector, has been phenomenal. So I think I have satisfied you by mentioning Beta Lab, and I also picked up some of what we are doing in Britam to increase communities' resilience. Yeah.
Thank you, Tom. Absolutely. Please, could we have a round of applause here? Marianne, you just teased a bit on, your industry, what Hack was doing, and just how, I think now for me, it's how you're transforming Hack to be a responsible business. I think you mentioned in terms of the space you're playing in. If you could just kind of expand further on that.
The manufacturing sector is so guilty when it comes to this whole debate about climate change. And I'm so glad that the previous chair of Global Compact was Martin Ochieng, who is the CEO of Sasini. And we sit together in Kenya Association of Manufacturers and in the Environmental Committee. So he's a key driver of this. We have to be accountable. We have to act, we have to lead in this particular process. So there are a number of things that we do at HACO. So we have 2 factories. We have a manufacturing factory for plastics, because our product goes into a plastic bottle, right? Otherwise, how do you beautiful ladies take your personal care and your hair care products home? It has to be packaged. We manufacture that. That dirties the environment, doesn't it? Our manufacturing process will use various kinds of fuels. The kind of fuel that you use to manufacture, we purposefully are moving towards green fuel. So solar is a big one. We identified a young man. He's not young. He's around my age, and I'm not young. He actually used to work in Unilever. And he's come up with an invention where he takes plastic and I'm not an engineer of any sort, he smelts it into a clean fuel. So we buy that, we give him our plastic bottles, and he then smelts it, makes this clean fuel, and we use that fuel in our generators and in our boilers. So instead of going to buy diesel, we are using a cleaner fuel from our dirty plastic, right? So you see that circle that we are now creating when it comes to the aspect of circularity. I think all of you grew up with those of you who are Kenyan, Hakorula. You all know it. Hakorula, that is us too. But every time the government and the Ministry of Education, which insists that all children must use Hakorulas for their exams, it's plastic. And what happens? Your kids lose it, they break it, they chuck it, they forget it, right? So we are now also going into schools and talking to children. First of all, putting a big, huge bin, taka bin, and tell them any rulers that you found on ground, put them in the bin. And we explain to them about how do we recycle these rulers, what happens to them, and we come with seedlings and we get them to plant seedlings. So we also put that bit into it. There are a number of other areas that we have innovation, in every department. But what I do want to say, and I think you're going to ask this question later on, it's driven from the top. And if I don't drive it, it's not going to happen. And I mandate, it's in their KPIs. Every department must have a KPI with regards to sustainability. So if it's finance, what does sustainability mean to you? What is your project? If it's marketing, what is your project? If it's HR, how are you going out to the TVETs, to the colleges, to educate and to bring in interns? So everybody's got a different agenda, which then helps us spread out wider to create more impact in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes. You preempted it. Indeed, you started in from an sort of an internal look as well. I think maybe, Tom, you can just touch on the bit about the private sector policy. How do we ensure that even the policy environment kind of supports sustainability? And then maybe also that Terry can answer the same. So you have the innovations, yes. There's a bit of action internally, but now we're looking at how do we have it, especially within your various industries. So maybe you can go first.
Okay, so if you take the insurance sector, and I can see one or two colleagues here, penetration is quite low, and consequently, you could argue that the resilience of our communities in that respect is therefore low. And any policies that enhances and increases the possibility of insurance penetration going up is something that we advocate for and that we push for collectively, but also as individual companies. And if you look at one of the reasons why insurance penetration may be low, one of the reasons often given is innovation. We don't like it when we are told we are not innovative, because we think we are. But there is a pillar there, therefore. So what is government, anyone doing towards promoting innovation? So that becomes something that is important. But as a private sector player, it is often more effective if you actually start off with what you can do, even as you advocate and so on. So one of the things we've realized as Britam, and maybe you will bring this up later, is that what we can do is important, but it is limited. So doing it with others is probably more effective. And a few years ago when we were joining the UN Compact, to us it was a no-brainer, because you want to find out what others are doing, where you can slide in and do it together. But I am a strong advocate for start with what you have and what you can do. And then as policy aligns, but influence policy. Actually, I think a big role of some of the associations we belong to is so that our voices can be heard. You can get a meeting with some important people, if you are with some of these organizations than you can as a private business on your own. But innovation then becomes part of our DNA and as Britam. And that's why the Beta Lab idea gets a lot of support again from the board, right from the board and shareholding. So if I answer the question I want to answer rather than the one you have asked me, it is that we must do what we can and join with others where that makes sense, rather than sit back and wait for policies, guidelines, and legislation to align.
Must do what we can. Absolutely right. I think from your side as well, Dr. Ari, I think it's been a very, very turbulent sort of industry, I would say, looking at the whole policy directives as well. So I don't know, perhaps maybe as an industry, what are some of the innovative ways that, perhaps, as Tom mentioned, you can do what you can do within your mandate?
Sure. I mean, Green 365 was one of those things that we did. What we must know, Laban, is that the healthcare industry is highly regulated. I mean, I think I would say we are over-regulated. I mean, we have licenses that are almost 3 or 4 pages thick. There's a physiotherapy license, there's a radiology license, there is general licenses, there's a music license, there's a copyright license. I mean, it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming, and of course, it's difficult to sustain in such a highly regulated industry because we must comply. But to change this narrative a little is putting this conversation in more of an African context. And what I feel is Africa needs to stop being the recipient of frameworks, guidelines, and roadmaps. We need to be able to come together as CEOs and audiences in this room and come up with more collaborative efforts and look for more homegrown solutions that are human-centered. That is how we are going to create innovation. Copy-pasting will not work for the long term. Our waste segregation systems are still very informal. There is fragmented energy use. There are fractured circular supply chains that are there, and a lot more challenges when it comes to looking for the right resources to run institutions. And with all this, I think I would encourage that we come together and collaborate through the public-private partnerships that I spoke into a bit earlier on, have more advocacy around sustainability efforts, and most importantly, share your data sets. I think there is a big gap in healthcare sharing data sets. If today we were to really understand the data quality, I think you can poke lots of holes in it. And to be able to build a governance structure that does not have a robust data set, it becomes questionable. So more advocacy is definitely required. More collaboration rather than competition is what is required and is the need of the hour right now.
I think, please. Yeah, you can clap for her, please. See you some.
I'm so clapping for you. I just want to support something she's talked about when it comes to policies. So how many of you know that collecting garbage is a cartel business in this country? You know, good. All right. Now I'm going to shock you. There's a company called Mr. Green that goes around the country collecting garbage. They gather plastic bottles, these water bottles that we throw, that are thrown out of the matatu, right? They go around collecting all those plastic bottles. They take them to their factory, they crush them, they clean them, they crush them, and turn them back into the pellets, which is the raw material for manufacturing more bottles, more packaging. So manufacturers like us can go to Mr. Green and buy that raw material from them, and then that means you are recycling, because you're now using pellets that were already bottles before, right? It is more expensive to buy those pellets than it is to buy them from Saudi Arabia, fresh. In that sense, what is going to incentivize us manufacturers to recycle if that cost is so high? And what makes that cost so high is because of these cartels. The cost of collecting garbage. Then on top of that, manufacturers have there's this new EPR, it's called EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility. Because we manufacture plastic, we pay a fine to government. What is a fine? Tax, right? It's the percentage of your plastic output on a monthly basis. You have to pay that to government every month. So that is also, what's the word? Decentivizing? That word? Yeah? Not incentivizing me to recycle. And when you look at the policy, they don't care that you're going to buy recycled raw material. They don't care. They've written their policy. And as far as they're concerned, you have to pay that tax. So this is just to support what you are talking about. We need to collaborate. When those policies are being drawn up, let the people who actually understand the business be part of the development process of that ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marianne. Appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, I want now to come to you before I get to the call of action. I know you mentioned about changing the conversation to sort of an African, Pan-African chat, but now before we do, and coming back to you for a call of action to your colleagues, allow me to ask if there's anyone in this. I know we have, insurance sector represented, manufacturing represented. So is there any other sector or any other person who has some bit of comment or any question as well before I come back to the panel for closing remarks? Yes, sir.
I have a comment. Along the line that you have touched on, and that is on policy. Most of you here, CEOs, captains of the industry, are possibly, you have to be a bit polite when you're talking, because you will be interacting with the policy makers, and you have to be constrained. And I was having a chat with my colleagues here that for 15 years, I worked as a consultant for the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, primarily on ethics. And yesterday, I asked the KAM to provide me with the non-tariff barriers, the list of the tariff and non-tariff barriers. And I called the CEO, I called Thomas, I called Mr. Orlando. I said, these are the same ones that were there 15 years ago. And what I'm saying is that as you discuss honestly how you can collaborate, I think you have also got to find a way to engage with the policy makers so that when those policies are being written and being conceived, at least they have got a way to invite you. In countries, say some countries, for example, in the US, we know that the retired senior government officers and UN officers are normally incorporated in the private sector as lobbyists because the regulators, whether it is Kenya Bureau of Standards, whether it is Kenya Revenue Authority, Weights and Measures, they have got an appreciation of their kind or those who have worked with them, so that as the CEOs discuss their challenges and how to overcome, they have also got maybe somebody somewhere in their consultancy within the UNGC or within the Kenya Association of Manufacturers or within KEPSA or KM to go to lobby with you, to take you along so that the regulators can also better listen to you. This, in my experience, is something that having worked for the KM, I found was missing for a long time. Somebody who has been an insider within the policy, within the government, coming to work with you because you have got other immediate concerns so that you have got somebody to take you to the regulator. Thank you.
My name's Anthony Wenaina. I work for a logistics company, so we move things around, not garbage, but other things. So I think I've maybe two quick comments. The insurance people, I think innovation and insurance is hard to put in one line, but that's a story for another line, for another day. I think I want to make a comment about what Dr. has said about guidelines and how we should not be takers. I think the key point is who pays for these guidelines. So somebody else is paying their experts to deliver these guidelines, okay? Unless we have our own money and try to pay our experts and try to do that, we'll always be takers. Why are these guidelines, especially in pharma, done? They are driving a bigger agenda, okay? And I don't want to go much in that. That's why we have this problem. And until we get a situation whereby we are able to financially or from look at it differently, whereby we say, these guidelines, how can we not develop ourselves? Can we pay people who understand us? And also, can we also tap into resources that are locally available, not always getting out? Because most guidelines are paid by other people to tell us what to do with which products, and that's a problem right there. In terms of policy, I think I've always been on that side of the table, and I've blamed government policy. The last 2 years, I happen to be thrown into a government board, and I see it different a bit. I still think what everybody thinks, but I feel also that private sector shies a lot from really getting engaged. And we cannot sit here and say, why are policies being done without us? And we are nowhere to be seen. Our systems, our trade, whether I won't name them, but our trade associations are very weak, and we are not on the table. And sometimes, and I will speak for the small board I'm sitting, we are more open to picking a bit of policy, a bit of learnings from private sector. But private sector shies a lot. There is no energy to engage. There is no resources. There is no lobbying. But this policy then affects business in a very big way. So we are seated there, and then we get a policy that really is very detrimental to our business, but we are never engaging with the intensity and maybe with the right people at the right corners that we should. So about that, I think that's all I have to say for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony.
I think mine is for Marianne. I worked with Marianne at HACO from 2018 to 2022. But listening to her today, really it's about those small steps and making those commitments and starting. Because that's just 3 years ago, and what she's described today didn't exist. The HACO I left didn't have this sustainability stuff that she's talking about today. So I think that's what it is about. It's making those commitments and actually getting to do them. I was joking with her earlier when I told her, Marianne, you kept saying these things and we kept looking at you and wondering, what are you talking about? But she's actually realized them in just those 3 years. So I think that's a call to action, really. Can we all just make those commitments and actually get on a journey towards actually actualizing them? So well done, Marianne.
Thank you very much. Once again, my name is Jackson Kiplagat, and I work for WWF Kenya, the Worldwide Fund for Nature. So I'm not business and I'm not government. So I'm somewhere there in between. So allow me to congratulate, of course, the business leaders here for sharing their experiences and the many interventions that they are trying to put in place to be able to deal with the challenge of sustainability. And I just wanted to raise some few comments. One is, imagine if business was to think of sustainability in the context of business risk. You remember that building that was brought down near along Langata Road some time ago? How many billions was invested in that building? Possibly maybe $1 billion Kenya shillings or more. what happened? There was something that happened there. Maybe somebody did not realize that it was misplaced and it was on top of a river system. Somebody went to the bank. My sister here maybe provided some money. It was put up, completed, but flattened. There were businesses also that had gone to the same sister of mine to get investment into their small businesses in the various floors. Do you think that person that invested that 1 billion or 1.5 will be able to pay back? Assume that for one reason or the other, the bank, I'm not saying it is hers, but I'm just using an example, had actually considered looking at some of those spaces that are not supposed to be construction spaces and said, for us, in our sustainability report, we are not going to invest in businesses or in investments that are not in the right places. That investment would not have been lost. Today, we complain about Nairobi River. Who is getting water from Nairobi River here? Nobody. Why? Because that water is polluted. If you look at the source of pollution, it is various sources. Okay? It means if you have even to get your bowl water, you have to pay a little bit more to treat that water, pay a lot of money so that you can be able to use that water. And if you are using water in your business, it means you're going to draw part of your profit to invest, to clean the water so that you can be able to use. So I think that is where we possibly need to look at also the issue of nature and climate risk. As my good friend from Britain was speaking, information came out of an alert at 16 hours today of the flooding that has just happened in the Tana River Delta. Climate change. We lose about 2.4% of our GDP annually to either drought or floods. But we still build our roads as if we are not aware of that. We don't provide, passes for water. And when it rains like this, all the roads are underwater. What happened to the businesses and the engineers and So the next day we lose all the 5 billion investment for whatever kilometers of road. And then we come again and say, let's look for more money to put in. For business, for government, for citizens, it is a big loss. So I think congratulations, but I think we need to think about ourselves and be mean to ourselves as business as we look at the future of our sustainability, even without looking at what government will say or what government will not say. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I know I'm straight for time. We're going to open it up for a Q&A as well, particularly after our guest speaker. But allow me to have Amra conclude this bit, but I'll come back to each and every one of us for another quick response.
I'll be quick. So I think to the point of collaboration and policy, what we all need to do is use our strengths to be able to see how we input into those. So some of the things we've done perhaps more strongly with the finance bill is support the industry associations in getting good data, good information, so that when you're going to lobby, you come from a very strong point of view. There's a time we even give our team of actuaries to KAM to help with certain analysis so that it's very clear what the impact of certain things are. So I think the best thing for all of us to do is to find what are our strengths, how do we help each other, so that then we're able to bring policy in a very clear manner, so that the policymakers can see what the effect of certain things they do is.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you, Anthony, Bosco, Mihaki, Kiplagat, and Madam Anne. Please give yourselves a round of applause. It's now our time. I know some came off as a question as well and comments, but I'll just throw it to you, business leaders, to just kind of wrap it up with a call to action. I think you can maybe choose to respond to any one of those, but of course, also give a call to action, not necessarily directly on your industries, but also just as a leader in your own sphere. So, Doc, go first.
Laban told me, will I be able to climb this stool? So I had to tell him, yes, I just climbed Mount Kenya 3 weeks ago. So, and we need to go together. Anne is a hiker too. The global greenhouse gas emissions emitted by healthcare is 4.4%. And with these starking statistics, it's the same healthcare that we consume. We are at a very critical juncture as a healthcare institution to balance SDG 3, which is good health and well-being, and SDG 13 on climate action. It's indeed a paradox for us that how do we handle climate action and still provide good health and well-being? It is a challenge that we continuously battle. As we battle this challenge again and again, I think my call to action will be, let's collaborate, let's not compete, let's have more homegrown solutions, but most importantly, solutions that are more human-centered.
Thank you.
I think for me, and taking some lessons we've taken at Britam, ESG is not something you do at 5:30 after you've done your business strategy from 7:30 or 8 whenever you get into the office. It actually makes business sense to be cognitive of the changes that are happening in the environment and taking action to ensure that you mitigate them. Study after study has shown that companies that take governance as seriously outperform sometimes up to 20% their peers. And when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, including companies like ours where the more traditional products perhaps target the middle class and the well-to-do, but deliberately designing products that serve underserved communities, whether it's pastoralists, farmers, whoever they may be. This makes business sense and should be incorporated in your normal business strategies. So my call to action is embed ESG in your business strategies rather than as an afterthought. Of course, Anthony did not expect to get away after his jibe at Vivian. So, Anthony, can I suggest that you consider changing your insurance provider to a more innovative one? Thank you.
I'm going to follow up from what Tom has said, and it's exactly the same cry. We must be purpose-driven because it makes good business sense. How? If you create impact to the climate, it means the agricultural sector will be more manageable, which means that we will get food. It means that our communities will have jobs. And when our communities have jobs, they have money to buy your products, be it insurance, come to hospital, etc., etc. You create employment. What does this do in the long run? It makes you strong. I'm following from what Anthony said also. Private sector are not at the table. Do we realize how strong we are in driving where this country goes to? We always shy away and complain. Complain about taxes, complain about regulation, complain about policies, complain that so on. One after. Have you ever gone to a dinner party lately and listened to the conversation? But where are we? We're not on that table. You will get on that table when you are creating employment, when you are impacting the agricultural sector. Government will listen to you. So my cry is, in the next 2 years, how does private sector become the next opposition party? And that is how we have to think. Thank you.
Madam Marian Musagi, Managing Director, Hako Industries, Tom Gitoga Group, CEO, Britam Holdings, and Dr. Tosif Dean, CEO, Embisha Hospital. Asante sana.
Good afternoon, everybody. Fellow CEOs, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I know we've had Paul before. Quite a number of us met him during his last visit. But I would like, Paul, if you'll allow us for me to read through a very quick introduction. And these ones are best read so that I don't miss anything. Paul Polman is a globally recognized business leader, philanthropist, and investor focused on accelerating business action to achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals. As a member of the UN Secretary General's high-level panel, Paul was one of the 27 members tasked with shaping the SDGs and played a critical role in advocating for the role of the private sector in achieving them. As CEO of Unilever, so this is not someone just talking from the high pedestal. As CEO of Unilever 2008 to 2019, Paul set a benchmark for purpose-driven leadership, proving that sustainable business is good business. During his tenure, Unilever's shareholder returns increased to 90%, while the company was consistently rated as the world's most sustainable business and celebrated. Paul continues to shape global business agendas through the development of cross-sector alliances and engagement with leading companies to tackle climate change, biodiversity loss, environmental degradation across key value chains. He advises and serves on the boards of several leading companies and holds honorary roles with the International Chamber of Commerce, ICC, not the other ICC, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, the B Team, and the UN Planetary Guardians. He provides strategic counsel to global institutions, including as an advisor to the World Trade Organization, WTO. Until June 2024, Paul served as Vice Chair of the UN Global Compact alongside Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who appointed Paul as an SDG Ambassador Emeritus. Paul is at the forefront of sustainable finance, working with several major impact funds that collectively steward billions of dollars in assets to advance the SDGs through high-impact sustainable investments. Paul is committed to fostering the next generation of responsible leaders. He served as the chair of the Oxford Said Business School from 2019 to 2025. As a co-founder and chair emeritus of Imagine, and through advisory boards with INSEAD, IASE, and One Young World, he mentors emerging leaders dedicated to sustainability and inclusion. As a strong advocate for inclusion, and for me this is really the most powerful one for Paul, for inclusion, disability rights, and human dignity, Paul chairs the valuable 500-founded Kilimanjaro Blind Trust, which empowers visually impaired children in Africa. He advanced global health and resilience initiatives through his role on the board of the Rockefeller Foundation. I'm coming to the end of it. You see why I needed to read this. Paul co-authored the best-selling book, Net Positive: How Courageous Companies Thrive by Giving More Than They Take, which was recognized by the Financial Times and Thinkers 50 as one of the top business books of the year. For his contribution to business and sustainability, Paul has received numerous honors, including being named an Honorary Knight Commander of the Order of the British Empire, awarded Francis, I can't pronounce this one. We'll put it up on the screen, Legion d'Honneur or something of that sort, Singapore's Public Service Star, and the Oslo Business for Peace Award. He has also received over 15 honorary degrees. So there's a website, www.paulpolman.com. I'm sure it has a lot of this information. Sorry, Paul, I had to read through all of that, but it is a great pleasure to have you back, and I would like you to come up and join me here for a very quick fireside chat, after which we'll open up for a conversation. Welcome. All right, so Paul, welcome back. Welcome back with the usual traffic jam and rain that follows you to Nairobi.
Better than last year.
And it's really good to have you back. And I thought I'll start with the subject of leadership, and I was thinking about it as we saw the corporate leaders up here talking about all that they do. And on this subject of the SDGs, and any subject really, leadership is where it rises and falls. Whether you're looking at leadership at the private sector level, leadership from the UN, public sector, political leadership, global leadership. And really my first question to you is, as you look at the leadership, what gives you hope and inspiration? And what maybe gives you a bit of sleepless nights?
Oh, I appreciate that, Abdi. And by the way, a terrific panel before, so I don't have to repeat all of it, because I totally agree with all speakers in the way that they think about running businesses. I only always think it's a shame that when we all get together, we get together with the people that are already convinced. We need to spend more time with the ones that aren't yet, because they desperately need to change. Otherwise, we can't do it together alone. We're a tremendous force, and I can motivate you to that extent, but it requires much more to move the systems, and we're paying a price for our slowness, to be honest. Also want to, I came in yesterday night very late, and I saw a plane that crashed in Kenya, so I want to give my condolences there and my sympathy, as well actually as the passing on of one of the great opposition leaders in Kenya, which is obviously Odinga, which I had the pleasure of meeting several times. And I'm not politically involved in Kenya, but I always think it's good if democracies work. And one of the things I admired in him is that, although it must have been incredibly painful, but I think 4 or 5 times he tried to become president. And I don't know if he should have been or not, but he always graciously at the end, I think, made democracy the prevailing direction. And that has to be applauded in today's world, where democracy is declining so much. So what keeps me awake at night is actually the undermining of democracy and institutions. I think that's a major issue, which unfortunately is going in the wrong direction in most countries in the world. There's one country, obviously, that has a high visibility, but where I would say the president is just a symptom of a deeper thing underlying what causes this bifurcation in society, this polarization that we now see in politics. Today, our country has elections in the Netherlands. I assume you're Dutch, but has a and it's the same polarization, and I can see that in many places in the world. So that worries us, because if institutions don't function fully, I don't think we get all the tools that we need to solve these things. And I think Anders talked about that very eloquently. One of the things where the UN falls short is, in fact, in the building of these institutions. It is in the financing mechanisms behind initiatives behind it. It is so. In that sense, we need to step up. The other thing that what keeps me awake at night is that, although on the positive side we are moving in the right direction. Don't be misled by what you read. We are actually increasingly understanding that we have an issue in the destruction of biodiversity, in causing climate change. People increasingly understand that we're actually destroying what keeps us alive in the first place, on which we're destroying what our economic system depends on. And that's not a good long-term strategy. And in the last few years, especially, the invoices have been sent to us at a quite rapid rate. So people understand that. Don't be mistaken. There are some people that don't like to understand it, but they do understand it. So what you now see in politics or what you read in the papers is directly linked to vested interest. Is directly linked to money in politics. You know, it's not anything anymore that people say, I wasn't aware. 15, 20 years ago, we didn't know the plastics in the oceans would cause such a problem. Or we didn't know that climate change would go so fast because we moved so many people out of poverty with this linear production model. But if anybody now claims I wasn't aware of it, then they don't deserve to be leaders in this world. So I think that's very clear. So what worries me is a little bit how the human works. We have had long evolution in our 3.5 billion years of this world having come into existence, and human beings for a few 100,000 years, if you want to call it that way. But we have never seen change so fast. And as we saw with COVID as well, we have a hard time thinking exponential. We think linear, really. So we take actions, and we might take it a little faster than we do before. But the problems we now have are exponential. And you cannot solve an exponential problem with a linear solution. So there is this false notion amongst many companies that they're doing much more than they were doing before, that they are therefore not part of the problem. The problem must be somewhere else. But collectively, we're still creating quite a big problem. And that's why I wrote this book after many people twisted my arm, to be honest, because I'm not into book writing. But we have to change our mindsets from moving from the CSR mentality, which was mentioned by the previous panel as well, to becoming actually RSC, responsible social corporations, where you put in the middle of your strategies, not just sustainability or purpose, I understand that, but where we become true regenerative leaders, where business really thinks about its validity in this world by making things better, not by making things less worse. That's a big mindset change. So how do you run a business in food where you think about regenerative agriculture, where you restore the soil health, where you restore biodiversity on which you depend, where you give the smallholder farmers a decent livelihood? That's regenerative thinking. How do you run a big beverage company and think about becoming water positive, where you actually have cleaner water going out of your factories than coming in, where you actually create watersheds so that nature can play its role, where you provide water to people that don't have access to it? That is what we would call net positive thinking. In Unilever, when I started building offices, and we had enough of those being in 190 countries and one of the biggest companies in the world, but when the COP21 was in Paris, if you remember, in 2015, I deliberately timed a building that we were opening, a new office building. That was the first building in France. If you think about it, in 2015, it's not that long ago, was the first building in France that actually gave more energy than it used. So we had put all solar panels on it. We had built it with thermal and many different features that were already available then. So it became an energy positive building. That's net positive thinking. But think about the people in that building. Our building gives more energy than we take. It's a very motivating thing. It became a slogan in the business. It started driving the people. So that's net positive thinking. So what keeps me awake at night is that mindset shift is happening too slowly. And as it happens too slowly, the problems are coming at us at a too fast a speed. The world's health, the planetary health, is measured by the Stockholm Resilience Institute, who has done a lot of work, and planetary scientists, in 9 characteristics on land, on oceans, on nitrogen levels, on particles in the air, on quality of water. These are characteristics that define ultimately human health. And the reality, unfortunately, is that now 6 and oceans has just been added,
making it 7 out of the 9 planetary boundaries, are already outside of what we would call acceptable limits. So we're very close to negative tipping points. We've missed the 1.5 degrees warming. If anybody still thinks we can stop below 1.5 degrees, you're not in line with science anymore. We've passed the 1.5 degrees. We can come back to it, but it will take us till the end of this century to do that. We can, and we should come back to it, because we know that if we move outside of that range, we destabilize so many Earth systems that we put our own existence at tremendous risk. Just like the 74% of species that have already disappeared in this world as a result of our actions today, there will be a day of reckoning when it's our turn. So it ought to keep us awake at night. What I'm hopeful of, which is why I want to end with the hope, which is much more important, is the human agency. I go around everywhere in the world. I used to think I have to talk to people about giving them hope to incite them into action. But what I've discovered is far more so, it's the many actions I see that actually give me hope. There are so many good people in the world doing so many amazing things that if we would just sit together, or what was mentioned in previous panel, the partnerships to work together to scale it faster, that gives me hope. The young people, we will talk about Africa undoubtedly anytime we're here, a continent where all the growth of young people in the world, an additional 1 billion, will happen on this continent. But if you see the ideas, the creativity that is present here, the entrepreneurship, if we could just unlock that and give that a little bit more agency, give them a bigger seat at the table, listen a little bit more to them, that would be very, very exciting. The final thing that gives me hope is probably the simple fact of economics. It's hard to change the law of economics of how business runs things. Because they say if it costs more, it's more expensive. I know it's the right thing, but I can't afford it. Or then I'm uncompetitive. But now we're in a situation, if we like it or not, that I could argue with any business in the world that about 80% of the things you can do better today are cheaper than you're currently doing it. And they're better for the planet. Green energy is now cheaper everywhere. It's cheaper, it used to be cheaper against new fossil fuel investments. Now it's cheaper against installed fossil fuel investments. Even with the drill baby drill that some presidents shout, nothing is being drilled because it doesn't make economic sense. You see, we are now 40% of green energy in the world. Countries like China are obviously driving it, but we've seen Pakistan move from 0 to 20% green energy over the last 2 years alone. Solar has come down since the 70s by 99%. But more surprisingly, in the last 2 years it has halved. In the coming 2 years it's going to halve. There is not one investment that can beat that. And battery capacity, which you need for storage, is that same curve is happening. So we see exponential cost changes in technology that give me hope. And to some extent, the cost of not acting is going up exponentially as well. And that is why I keep saying to businesses, this probably is your biggest business opportunity, and frankly, the only one, because we won't get many more chances. This is your biggest business opportunity you'll ever get. And companies that understand that, I brought some charts I can show you, but companies that understand that are increasingly being rewarded for that by the marketplace. The financial market will invest in companies that are better positioned for a future that we need to have. They are not going to invest in companies that are positioned against an old brown. They're going to invest in companies that are positioned for a green, inclusive, sustainable future. And you see that bifurcation happening in the financial market. If you would have consistently invested in green companies leading the transition, I can guarantee you that you and your investments would have done better than if you would have just invested in an average group of companies. So even amongst the climate change movers, if we look at the leaders within these movements, they're actually getting rewarded more by the financial market. So even in the people that move, the leaders of them get rewarded more. So if there's any doubt, it doesn't make economic sense. So then you say, why are people not doing it? It's the 20%. And the people are very smart to use the 20% to hold the other 80% hostage, because it's easy in our thinking. We don't know how long we're going to be CEO. It's a little bit hard work to change, because if I do it, others might benefit, or my competitor might also get the benefit, or it's my share price. I can crank it up by being short term, instead of doing the right things for the long term. We know all these symptoms. Or it's the government that should do the things, so it's not my problem, it's the government's problem. It's very easy to have which I think are signs of weak leadership, to put the onus on someone else outside of your sphere of influence. But the reality is it's all of us. It's all of us that frankly are underperforming. I don't want to demotivate you, but all your companies are not in the net positive mentality yet. You might agree with it, but you're not certainly doing it. And there's nothing preventing you from doing it. Of course we need governments. Of course we need others. Of course we need some technologies. I understand that. But go after the 80%. And the other 20% will have some time. We'll get nuclear fusion that is different than today. We'll find hydrogen that is at competitive cost, or the few things that need to be done. But we wouldn't be sitting here if we had done the 80%. We would have not had the challenges that we're currently dealing with. And the sad part is, I'll stop there, but the sad part is you in general, but you as society, are paying already now a price that is much higher than people realize in everything. There was a good comment on the Shah Hospital of how we create the problem that we're then trying to solve ourselves. So what are we really doing here? It's close to a definition of insanity. But the way we feed people, for example, the cost is infinitely higher to society than what it cost us to produce the food in the first place. And then we're still unable to feed a billion people properly. But we're creating malnutrition on the one side that affects about 2 billion people in this world. We're creating overweight or obesity on the other side that affects 2.5 billion, 3 billion people. So 5 billion out of the 8 billion people are not getting a benefit from a good food system. Then we cut down all the forests in this world. 30% of global warming comes from food systems. We degrade the land. All the land in the world is degraded. Few exceptions. Africa still has a lot of good land. It's one of your advantages. But we cut the forests. Then we waste 30 to 40% of the food. If food waste alone would be a country, it would be the third biggest emitter after China and the US. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And then we call ourselves the wisest human beings or the smart. I don't get it. Honestly, I don't get it. But all those things have a cost that are much higher than what we would need to invest to prevent it. For 300 to 500 billion a year, we can save trillions or unlock trillions by doing it right. So that is our challenge, collective challenge to get there. And it's very hopeful to me that we have the technology now, we have the financing, we have the awareness. So what we now need, and where we are probably short in this world, is this leadership. And leadership requires here willpower. And that's a renewable resource in itself, so that's a good thing.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Paul. I think a good note of hope to close that one on. I think Marianne, when she spoke, said it's top down. And really the impact that leaders have on this conversation is going to be very important going forward. You mentioned Africa, so I wanted to just come back a little bit to that topic. It's a bit of a contradiction, some very good stories. 90% or so renewable energy use in Kenya as an example. Ethiopia is even higher. Young population, lots of innovation, fintechs, startups, tech. So a lot to be hopeful about. But on many of the other statistics that you just talked about, income inequality, poverty, malnutrition, probably a big chunk of that 2 billion in Africa. And so a lot to solve for. So where do you see that, and how do you see that journey progressing for Africa?
No, a lot to be solved for. I think the biggest challenge on the macro level for Africa, and again, I refer to the previous panel in a minute, but the biggest challenge in Africa, which is a world challenge, it's not just an African challenge, is you're going to get 900 billion more people, and you'll probably, with AI and all the things that are happening now, will have a hard time creating jobs for about 300, 400 million people. It requires to really think differently about these transition minerals and the green economy, infrastructure, agricultural systems, the role you want to play and how you want to play in AI. That is a huge challenge, to be honest. That's probably the biggest challenge of Africa. The gift that you're given now is a realization. I'm on the Mo Ibrahim Foundation. You forgot to mention that on your short list. Man, I do all these things for Mo and you don't even mention it. Finally, my Nubian brother is left out here whilst we were in Africa. He would kill me if I wouldn't mention it. But I'm on the board of the Mo Ibrahim Foundation, and the previous panel was mentioning it as well. I think it is a sad thing that things like US aid get dismantled. It is a sad thing that foreign development aid is disappearing. It is a sad thing that countries that have created the climate problems are not willing to assume responsibility to help other countries avoid the issue, whilst they have a direct benefit from doing so. It is a shame that when we invent COVID, we buy 5 times the vaccines that we need for Europe and the US and only give past expiry dates to other countries and think we're doing a good deed. So the world has given signals many times before, and I think it's worse now, unfortunately, but it's the reality in the coming 10 years for sure, that not much help is coming from other parts of the world. So there is this realization that we now need to rise to that level. I think that's healthy. It's healthy for individuals, when your parents say you're now 18 or 17, go out and make your own living, you all of a sudden, holy mackerel, what do I do? So, but it's healthy for Africa as well. You have the African free trade zone that you've created, but nothing has moved, let's just be honest. I spent a lot of time with heads of state and other ones, and they're all, half of them are too old. They sit around the table and fall asleep. So that doesn't work anymore, we will have the US president probably wanting to be 100, but you have one next door here who's just got reelected, who will be 100 in office, and I don't even know if he really got elected, to be honest, and we all know that. So you have to get your act together in Africa. And the good thing now is, in a sense, but it's sad, Mohamed Yunus is a good friend, and he was explaining to me the real stories of what happened in Bangladesh, where the young people were just kept walking, even though the horrible corrupt regime of Sheikh Hasina kept shooting at them, but they just kept walking because freedom was more important to them, and democracy and a voice, than this oppression they were living under. We see it now in Madagascar. We've seen it in Nepal. We see it in many other places around the world now, where the youth actually once more. You've seen it in Kenya, if I may be honest. They've been on the street several times, and I think there is a sense now that that oppression level is higher than many people in many parts of the world can support. I'm expressing it deliberately, carefully. And I think we will see more of this. And if we don't carefully listen to these voices, but give them agency and provide the space, it's not going to work. I've always said that any system where too many people feel they are left behind or don't have the same opportunities will ultimately rebel against itself. And that's now very visible. So where does Africa needs to get its act together? On its governance, but that's in their control. On leveraging its total trade zone, that's under Africa's control. Africa attracts foreign investment. It will continue to attract foreign investment, by the way. I don't see any reason why not. Premiums are, risk premiums are actually coming down. Costs are coming down. You see many countries now taking, for example, solar panels from Africa or moving rapidly into green energy. So there's a lot of opportunity, and you're well placed for that. But next to governance and the free trade zones, I would say you have to create a functioning capital market. There is more money that Africans actually send out of Africa than would be justified under any region. There's 70, 80 billion that goes out, and it ends up in Singapore or in Switzerland. And I can tell you that's not so productive for any economy, for a few people, but not for any economy. So you have to get these capital markets to function properly, and then hopefully use some money to continue to invest in education. We all know Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore But and I was just there 2 weeks ago. But it was for Lee Kuan Yew, and I've met him a few times also, was very simple, education and corruption. We pay people properly, we don't accept any corruption, and we educate people properly. And if you have more money here, that's where you start. And yes, you need water, and yes, you need healthcare. We understand all of that. But if you don't educate your people, and if you don't ensure that your funds are used to where they are most productive, versus, then you will not get there. So I put it politely under functioning capital markets, but you understand it's a little bit. And you have your pensions here, you have your revenues you generate, you have actually assets in Africa that are quite substantial if you add them all up. Is it all channeled to the right things right now? I think less efficient than some other regions.
Yeah, thank you very much. So market efficiency, governance, prioritizing the big items, and so on. I think I'll open it up shortly, but one big one that I thought maybe you could address is around, there are myths in this space, a lot of myths that need to be broken. And you said the 20%, people who own almost the conversation have a louder voice, as a result of which a very sizable majority of people is emerging that either doesn't believe the narrative and doesn't support it, or believes it, but for various reasons is not moving in the right direction. So there's a communication element, and there are myths to be broken. How do you see that unfolding as we go forward?
Well, I think some of the bigger myths we talked about, the myth of that we have a lot of time. So we don't. The myth that we can live separately from nature. We don't. We are an integral part of nature and depend on that. The myth that sustainability costs more. So if I do something good, it must make me uncompetitive. I hear it from so many people. I mean, that's elementary school thinking. That is just abdicating responsibility. All these myths need to be busted. We are very fortunate to have Supana as the CEO of the Kilimanjaro Blind Trust Africa, which I happen to have founded 20 years ago. And it deals with people that are blind and deafblind, because we wanted to tackle the toughest problem in society in a continent where these people get the least attention, to include them in education, to unlock their full potential for life, just as we expect that from ourselves. Why is the fact that someone cannot see, why should they be penalized for that? Especially now when you have 1 million technologies available who make them often better than we are. So I deal with these myths. They're too expensive. They're more often sick. They're not loyal. They're not so productive. Okay, where does that come from? Well, someone else who had that same myth was telling me, have you ever read the realities? I have to talk to anybody. Hiring people with disabilities unlocks much more energy in your company than you think. They're probably more loyal than you've ever seen any of your employees be loyal. They will be very grateful to be part of that. They have dealt with so many uncertainties in their lives, that they are probably better able to deal with the pressures that are currently in society than any of us here in this room. So who are the blind ones? Who are the blind ones on sustainability? Who are the blind ones on the systems changes that we need? Who are the blind ones on ensuring that we have an inclusive growth model where everybody can rise to their fullest challenge? So these things are 100% in our own control. So what is the biggest thing that needs to change is, in fact, the 10 centimeters between these two things. It's not even 10 centimeters. It's probably, but that's the biggest thing we need to change. Helen Keller, who was blind and deaf, and she spoke 7 languages. She went to the Perkins School for the Blind in Watertown, Massachusetts. And she would give speeches. And the speeches were always wonderful, and people wanted to thank her, but they couldn't applaud, or they couldn't, say anything to her. So she always said to them very simply, if you want to show your appreciation, stamp with your feet on the ground, and I can feel the vibrations, And afterwards, people would always come up to her and say, Helen, it must be horrible to be blind. And they wanted to express sympathy. And Helen's answer was always the same. The worst thing is not being blind. The worst thing is having eyes and not being able to see. So what we're dealing with here is our own awareness of the issues. So with COVID, you saw when COVID came, let's not forget that moment. I think more people realized that we couldn't have unlimited growth on a finite planet with COVID. I also think more people realized how interrelated everything were. COVID is like Zika, Ebola, Asian flu, and the list goes on, is a direct result of destruction of biodiversity, zoonotic disease. People started to understand that. People started to understand also that we were all connected, and if we would work together, we could find solutions, especially if our lives were at risk, which is what we are talking about right now. So COVID gave us hope, but then we got sidetracked again. We went into other directions. We became self-centered again because the $17 trillion of money that we spent in Europe and the US, which is 5 times as much that we need to spend to implement all the sustainable development goals globally, just went to a few people, just like the financial crisis. We built out the wrong industries that were fossil-based or that were financially stressed because they had focused on the shareholder and be very short-term. They had over-leveraged their balance sheets and all that stuff. And we didn't invest in the right things for the future. That's how we end up in this situation. So now we have a final opportunity, I think, to correct that. Let's not miss that opportunity. Let's not miss that opportunity. And so it's not money, it's not technology that gets in the way. It really is our willpower, our individual and collective willpower. It hurts me to see the silence in the US now of CEOs. It hurts me to see how some have changed their values, the Zuckerbergs of this world. I'm not, I'm Dutch, I'll tell you what I think. But how they have flipped 180 degrees because they want to keep their billions. It's purely driven by, my hundreds of billions I have on my bank account, otherwise would be 90 billion or 80 billion instead of 150 billion. I mean, what has happened there? And why don't more people step in? I think it's starting to happen in the US. I'm actually optimistic. It's starting to happen. I think their legal system is still strong enough. Some of their institutions still I have confidence in. You see pushback becoming a little bit more vocal. But, we have to speak up. The worst thing we can do is be silent, because by silence, you give all that space to your opponents. And they 100% control the narrative. And when they control the narrative, the goalposts move. And it's very hard to come back from. So then people say, yeah, but how do I do that? Because if I say something, he goes after my company, or he kills my business, or he tweets on his, social network horrible things. Well, go together, or find different ways to talk about things. You don't have to talk climate change, but you can talk resilience. You can talk making your companies future-proof. You can talk about providing people, restoring soil health. You can talk about protecting biodiversity. There's nothing wrong with that. There are many things you can do. So why I went to COVID, and I want to come back on that, we saw this bifurcation during COVID in business models. The ones that were run short-term for the shareholder, myopically focused there, were not doing so well as the ones that were focused long-term, built on partnerships, purpose at the core. These businesses did better, multi-stakeholder. But we also saw for the first time a bifurcation on leadership, where we saw people with a high level of empathy, compassion, humanity, humility, leaders that had a deep sense of purpose, that embraced partnership, thought multi-generational. These leaders, not surprisingly, instilled a much higher sense of confidence in people. And these were the leaders that others wanted to follow. And these leaders are actually the ones that increasingly are separating themselves in the group of successful leaders transforming their companies. So this leadership bifurcation that we've never seen before is now stronger than ever, just like these company model bifurcations showed up. So what are the 3 leadership skills you need in this environment now? I call it very simply the ABC of leadership, to keep it in my own mind. But the A stands for adapt. Adapt to the realities of the situation. I didn't elect this president, or I didn't, caused this problem to emerge. But how do I adapt to that? Just like I adapt my language, how do I adapt and understand what is going on? The second one, and that requires effort. The B stands for bridging. How do I reach out to the other side? Instead of vilify, not talk, making them the part of the problem or getting anxiety or fear. How do you bridge and work together? It takes courage to bridge with someone that has completely opposing views. But I'm making an effort, and I think we should all do. And then the C stands for collaboration. I don't have to tell you that. If you adapt, if you bridge, then the next step very simply becomes do things together what you can't do alone is now probably the most important thing. Of course, you need to run your companies well and be responsible. And of course, you need to keep them afloat and have positive cash flow. But at the end of the day, we are at the point that the issues in society are bigger than any individual company can do. It's actually one of the reasons I left Unilever after more than 10 years there, because I felt Unilever can do some and can do a little bit more and has done a lot. But on the bigger issues of society, on how do you move through systems change, it needs a different way of working. And that's what I entirely focus on now, how to bring companies together, how to bring industries together, and how to move at scale fashion industry to better labor standards, sustainable cotton, how to move the airline industry to sustainable airline fuel. And often the issue is not technology again. The issue is this person needs to invest and that person gets the benefit. Or I need to invest in big capital, big factories on sustainable airline fuel, but nobody is willing to commit that they're going to buy from me. So who's taking the risk? So it's always risk return. That's how the world works. But if you bring people together and you show them that you can create a bigger pie, it's also much easier to divide. So we're now looking at, for Africa, at sustainable fertilizer. Fertilizer is very bad for the environment for many different aspects, including how you produce it. It's a big carbon emitter for the food industry. We can go to green fertilizer, which is basically green or blue ammonia, not to bother you with it, that costs less than 1 cent on the end product. But why is it not happening? Because the end users like Unilever and products like Knorr or Nestle and products like Maggi and whatever you have here, they don't buy the fertilizer. Who needs to buy the fertilizer? It's the farmer. The farmer doesn't have any money. So how can he pay 30 to 100% more for green fertilizer? He can't. So, but at the end of the day, it's only 1 penny at the end product to save the world. And my point is, if you all work together, I'm sure we're smart enough to get rid of that 1 penny as well because we work together. So you find opportunities even to probably be financially stronger. I've seen it in all the things I've been involved in. We always end up in a much better place even than people realize because we work together. So those are the real issues of society, why you need this collective action. Anyway, I've talked enough about that.
Thank you very much, Paul. Laban, I don't know what we have done to the timetable, but I'm sure we have questions from the floor that we can.
Yes, please. Martin, you want to go first?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I mean, last year, heading up to the US, and to just dial in onto that US topic, when we were chatting on this session, we were afraid of the incumbent or the person who was going to come in. Unfortunately, he came in. And what we are seeing is retrogression in the climate discussion.
Yeah.
And not just from the US, but a lot of Western economies and in the Northern Hemisphere as well, in the global North. It seems like that wave is stronger than the wave that is advocating for just transition. What's your focus? What's your view with that politically?
Well, it doesn't come in at the right moment, so I don't disagree with that. My first comment is always, it's not a good thing when someone deliberately tries to slow down, when they take incentives away to go faster green, and when they take that money and put it into more brown. That's what is happening in the US. The only country in the world, by the way, where fossil fuel consumption in the absolute is going up and is the US now, since his administration came in. So dismantling EPA or soft power that influence other people in the world to do the right thing, or putting perforce subsidies again, is not a good thing. Don't misunderstand that. But despite that headwind, electric vehicles continue to be sold in the US. The sales of battery and battery capacity continues to be sold. Solar panels continue to be sold in it. No new investments are justified in fossil. So at the state level, we have about 50 to 60% of the GDP at the state level. Take California, which is by itself by the top 10 wealth economies. They are moving forward and they continue to move forward at the city level as well. So the US is not totally black and white, if I may call it that way. But then outside of the US is 89% of the global emissions. And whilst there are 47 countries ahead of the Paris Agreement, there is 190 minus 47, it's too late for me now, but 143 that are still need to catch up. So it's not only the US. US is 11% of emissions. The US is 10 to 12% of global trade. There's 88% of global trade. That is doing very well if you talk to Ngozi, who is one of our sisters from Nigeria. And we see new alliances being formed. We see Africa, I think, being awakened. We see Asia being awakened and forming new partnerships that I think are healthier for the world than having a dominance of one system by one country, which has always been for their interest, in my opinion. So now you see different things happening. You go to the COP, we will not get universal global agreements anymore. That time is finished for the next, at least for the next 10 years that I can see. So we're living more in a pluralistic form of existence where you see new alliances being formed. One of the most exciting alliances is the Tropical Forest Forever Fund, where the Amazon Basin, the Congo Basin, and the Indonesian tropical forest are coming together with the adjacent countries to create a fund, 125 billion fund, which gives returns, 4 billion a year returns that can be given as annuities to countries that keep the forest standing. The first mechanism to reward people for natural capital is very exciting if we can pull that off at the COP. That's one of the discussions. By not having the US at the table, if I may be honest, it becomes much easier to move these things forward than in the past where, frankly, they were being boycotted. Why don't we have the plastic agreement, you know? It's because Saudi or petrol countries, they want to go into plastics because they see fossil going down. The US doesn't want any global agreement anymore. So they're sitting around the table just pulling it down. It's better to say, here are 50 or 80 countries that are moving. Now Europe is not watering down. Europe was over-regulating and stifling innovation. So for example, with the carbon border adjustments or the new omnibus laws, they will say companies that have a minimum, a low level of emissions, which actually turns out to be 90% of companies, they should not have to go through all this compliance. We should focus on the few, the 10% that accounts for 70, 80% of the emissions, for example. So the omnibus changes that Europe is trying to implement now are, I think, are more common sense than slipping back. And you need to have a right balance between legislating ourselves out of a problem and innovating ourselves out of a problem. And Europe has been falling behind a little bit also on AI, on the innovation side. So that's what they want to do back. I also think the Europe-Africa alliance is getting stronger because of the things that are happening in other parts of the world. Is a big opportunity. And when Europe put CBAM in place, the carbon border adjustment mechanism, for example, there's now much more talk in Europe as well on how can we help Africa in that transition to be better. And again, I think Africa is well placed for that. Without being at a competitive disadvantage, I think it can actually leapfrog you in a positive way. That's how it should be. So yeah, there are changes. It's not at the right time, but it's not all dark clouds. There's many silver linings.
So sustainability starts at top, no doubt, but also the youth is the key and our hope for future. So where do you see the youth and the power of youth for the Africa journey?
Well, 50% of the world population is below 30 years old. And in Africa, you have countries like Liberia, where the average age is 17. If you talk to Ellen Shirley, who who was with me on the panel on these sustainable development goals, it's nearly impossible to govern a country like that. But if you have 50% of the world population below 30 years old, you cannot exclude their voices. Nor can you be symbolically having a youth ambassador, but not giving them a seat at the table. So in many cases, I think the best ideas that I see, and it's not only driven by AI or technology, but also social entrepreneurs or new business models. You should look at some of those people and how old they are and how creative they are. And they're actually in less of a mindset of, oh, this is a problem, I feel guilty. They're more of a mindset, what an opportunity. I find solutions, I can do something about it. So if we would give them that space, I think that is where we need to focus on. On Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, I'm in Munich for One Young World. We carefully select every year. We have now over 15,000 of them, 3,500 social entrepreneurs. Interestingly, 40% or so from Africa, whilst this is a global, we go around the world. But Africa always the most present. And it's people that do amazing things at the humanitarian front or are protectors, indigenous peoples, protectors of stewards of our natural capital. Everybody is there. But there are people that go well beyond what most people think they are capable of. I go there to get energy. I'm not there to tell them anything. I go there to become humble and get energy for the next year, and then I have the next conference. But so give them that voice and give them that place. And they're demanding it. They're willing to sacrifice themselves with their lives for it in many places across the world now. So that's what we need to do. Not the only thing. It is stupid to say they have all the solutions because they need us as well. They're not going to obsolete us. And I don't think AIDS, in a sense, is a handicap at all. It comes with a lot of experience and possibilities to open doors, but then use that for that positive purpose. That's our role now, to make that generation successful, not to, cling on to the power that we have, gained in our lives. That should be our purpose a little bit more. So there's an obligation from us, in a sense, and there is a possibility to provide more oxygen to them. And where that happens, by the way, where the youth has a bigger voice, we can look at that now by countries, etc. as well. Also companies, by the way. In Unilever, again, I can give you the Unilever example, but I was sending every year 50 people to One Young World. And this has been going on for more than 10 years now, 12 years. So I had a group of about 500 people that had gone to One Young World, minus 100 who had left the company or the job. So there were 400 people there as a core. So I connected them, and they were a tribe. They felt that they belonged to the same tribe. And I gave them agency to make recommendations. I got more push from them in what we should be doing than I got from anything else. So it actually made the company better, in my opinion. And these are your consumers as much. These are your, most companies now have half their employees are millennials by definition. And yet, when we did a study with one of my other foundations, we found that 60%, which is 2/3, are willing to quit a company they work for now because the values are not aligned with their values, or what the CEO says is not aligned with the actions that they see. I'm not saying the actions aren't there, but what they see. So I'm careful there. But if you have 2/3 of people that are frankly unhappy by working for you, that's one of the reasons why we have seen consistently the engagement scores in companies go down. Companies now, there's an average engagement score in the US where they measure it as a big country of below 20%. So think about running your company with an engagement score of your employees below 20%. Now explain that to your shareholders. But it's the biggest opportunity you probably have to unlock value. When I came to Unilever, the company wasn't doing so well. They were selling assets. They were running it short term, chasing targets that they knew were not realistic. Makes you very short term, makes you sell the furniture. Our engagement scores were in the middle of a group of 8,000 companies. When we put the sustainable living plan in place and put that into practice, we went to the top of the top tercile. We got 2 million people applying to us every year. We were only hiring 8 to 10,000 a year in the company, but we got 2 million people. One of my ideas, which I never was able to execute, was think about these 2 million people who want to work for you that you cannot employ directly. How could you make them the best ambassadors of your company? We had people in the value chain, millions in the value chain, that were entirely dedicated to us. They got incredible motivation to be working on something that is bigger than yourselves. You know, we weren't selling toilet bowl cleaners. We were solving the issues of open defecation. We weren't selling Lifebuoy of a bar soap to wash your hands. We were trying to help a child reach the age of 5. We weren't selling food for people that could afford it. We were trying to solve the issues of hunger in the world. So if you run a program of food waste reduction and one boss says, cut down cost on food waste so that we have more profit and the shareholders more happy, or another company said, cut the food waste because we want everybody to go to bed with a full stomach and not hungry, which one is more motivating? Which one do you think gets better results? The power of purpose, the power of embedding that in a company is tremendous. So these engagement scores, I think they're undervalued, but unfortunately, many CEOs whose tenure now for the bigger companies, the tenure of a CEO has dropped to below 4.5 years. So they don't look longer than their nose, most of them. And they're very self-centered. How much can I get out? You know, now we're paying Elon Musk $1 trillion. I mean, you just tell me what's happening here. And everybody thinks it's normal. Today in the Financial Times, the chair was defending it. The chair of, we're paying him $1 trillion. I don't even know how much that is. Otherwise he will leave. Well, I think it's time he leaves. He's doing more damage than good to society. So what are we talking here? So some realism should come back into this, And your employees would be happy if that was there. Anyway, you had a question right next.
To the captains of industry here. How do we make sure that we don't kill the power of observation in communities, in families, and all that? I am a strong believer in sustainability, and I like what you said about regenerative leadership. And biodiversity is very close to my heart, and in particular soil conservation and protection, and also nature in general. And being in the agribusiness space, one of the observations that we have seen, in farming, there is aphids, if you know about aphids. And we queried, how come spinach are not really affected by aphids? And we decided to do some tests. We've done the tests, and you find the kales, that sukuma wiki as we call it, and the cabbages, they get really affected by aphids. And of course, the spraying goes and spoils the soil, kills the earthworms and all that. But then if the spinaches are not being affected by aphids, then that means that's probably good, it's not a pesticide, but at least something can be done. So what we did, we soaked spinach for 2-3 days and poured it on cabbages. And honestly, the aphids disappeared. Now, we are small SME, barely meeting our costs. We talked about the collaboration. So here I'm reaching out. Maybe there's a big company that can do tests on that. But the question is to the captains of industry, how do we not kill observation from the African context? Remembering the village concept where information was passed because we have observed, and then we do. Yeah? How do you help even those SMEs who are observing? People who are observing, they don't know how, they don't have the forums to present what they are observing. How do we capture that and then magnify it? Because you have the opportunity to do that. So anyway, just a comment.
No, and it's good that you voiced that. And first of all, 95% of the global economy is SMEs. They are big companies, I understand that. And they have SMEs in their value chain, but 95% of the global economy is SMEs. When I was chairing the UN Global Chamber of Commerce, 48 million companies are part of it. Also in Kenya, obviously, very strong. but it's all SMEs. Even the 302 companies with the UN Global Compact here, or the 22,000 that there's now globally, most of them are SMEs. So you're not alone. And anything we do, we should, like in Europe, the relaxing of some of the legislation is for SMEs. When we had COVID, we needed to put money available in the value chains to keep things going. We prioritized SMEs with all the governments. When we work things with the UN Global Compact or with the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, we put programs out there for SMEs. So make use of that. There are also some bigger companies that understand that, that have programs, and I'm talking about the Microsofts or the Walmarts, the type companies that, or the Unilevers of this world, but they have real programs to help the SMEs in their value chains. And sometimes the SMEs might not all be aware of it. But you're raising a bigger problem, which I think is important. The storytelling of Africa has a lot of wisdom in there, and that wisdom you don't want to lose. And what we find, for example, with protection of nature, that the best protectors of nature are the indigenous peoples. In most places in the world, they are actually living in about 80% of the nature zones that need to be protected. And they're doing a pretty good job because they know they fully depend on that. So what the global world has now done is, in the Biodiversity Convention that was negotiated in Cali last year, the COP15 on biodiversity, the funding, 20% goes to indigenous peoples. The representation in these conventions, indigenous peoples. The climate convention, which is the COP30 now that is happening, is doing the same thing. The UN has been instrumental in ensuring that indigenous peoples, i.e. the storytellers actually, or the stewards of our planet, if you talk about that, are getting increasingly recognized. The beauty of this Tropical Forest Forever Fund that I was talking to you about has clear mechanisms in there and also percentages of money that needs to go to indigenous peoples. The current market for carbon credit, for example, all the money ended up with the banks and some intermediaries and very little with the farmer. So people are aware of these things. And now for Africa itself, my final point would be, I was thinking when I was born, you will have the population of the world when I was born is the population that Africa will have over the next 50 years. So Africa has the same world population than when I was started. You have everything in Africa that you need. There's nothing missing I can think of that Africa needs from any other continent. I'm not saying you don't want to be integrated. Of course you want to. But you have all that possibility with your indigenous wisdoms, with your entrepreneurial environment, with your SMEs, with your natural capital, with your critical conversion minerals, which you are blessed of more than any other continent. You have everything there to, I think, take charge of that destiny, including leveraging the SMEs and creating these economies that are inclusive. So, it's in your hands. Make use of what is there from there. I'm always surprised at how much is out there that SMEs are not aware of because they're small. They don't have that many people to investigate what's all available. But if you can tap into some, and the UN Global Compact can undoubtedly help you with that. The fact that you're here is a good thing for that reason as well.
Thank you very much. And that story reminded me of, I was in Mount Kenya area in Central about 2-3 weeks ago, and I was out there with my friend Mihaki. And we went to see this school for children that have disabilities. And, we were going there, it's part of the CSR, we want to go and help these kids. But what we saw and what we experienced, and, back to your point about observing, I went there thinking we're going to help them and off we go. But these kids put on a show, there was a fashion show. They showed us products that they make, and they said, can you use this as part of your holiday gifts to your customers? And we did actually give them that commitment. and they're doing amazing stuff there. And we met a bunch of teachers who are there as a calling. You know, you don't do that kind of a job to be paid. It's about purpose. And they really converted us to their story. And so I really understand what you say about observation. Paul, thank you so much. As always, you know, it's inspirational to listen to you. As always, a lot to celebrate, progress that has been made, but also a call to action to all of us as chief executives and as business leaders to redouble the effort within our own organizations to build more collaboration. But I think back to the point that you started with, these are the converted, and therefore to do far more around getting more people included in the message and improving the scale of what needs to be done. So thank you very much. We'll close it there, ladies and gentlemen. A big round of applause for Paul. Thank you so much. A great pleasure. Thank you.
So allow me to just issue a vote of thanks to you, Paul. Thank you so much for the time that every time you come to Kenya, you dedicate a bit more of your time to have these conversations with our business leaders within the Global Compact. And I think for all of us sitting here today, it's been an evening well spent. I believe we are living with changed hearts, changed minds, and we're inspired and encouraged to do more within our own companies, but importantly, collectively as a business community here in Kenya, and of course, as a country that's even leading in the continent in advancing a lot of these actions around sustainable development. And so allow me to also thank our board of directors who are present here today, led by our chair, Mr. Abdi Mohamed. Also, we have our former chair of the board, Mr. Martin Ochieng from Sasini PLC. Thank you also very much for making time to be here, as well as to the other directors who formed the panel to also give you insights on what the Kenyan private sector is doing to advance responsible business conduct. And thank you all to the business leaders who were able to make the time. I know some of us were coming all the way from different counties. We do acknowledge that level of commitment. And from us here, the Global Compact is to say that this is part of a continuation of a conversation that we want to have with you all as business leaders within the Global Compact here in Kenya. We have those spaces where we're engaging with your technical teams, but we don't have enough of these types of convenings at your level for you to also come together with your peers and to begin to reimagine what responsible leadership means, what it looks like, and what kind of actions we can drive forward. So expect more in terms of these convenings, in terms of action platforms that will help us drive collective initiatives or aims to help us really build the Kenya we all want. And I think we have the powers, we have the capacities, we are leaders within our own companies, within our own industries. And so there's a lot more for us to take forward. But it starts with that conviction that we can each do our part, whether we are SMEs or the large corporates that are present in the room. But I think that one action coupled with the collaboration that we want to leave out of this room will help us move the needle. And I think this could be the defining decade of action and decade of impact for Kenya and for Africa as a whole. So allow me to leave it at that and to wish you all a good evening and safe return back to your homes. I think we still have the week ahead of us. So looking forward to further engagements. Thank you.